started as well?
I'll check.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعين ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فهو المهتدي ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما قال الله تعالى في كتابه العزيز بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. Allah Azza wa Jal, in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, all praise, glory and majesty belongs to Allah Azza wa Jal. And we ask Him to send His greatest peace and blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and upon his family and his companions, and upon all the believers until the day of judgment. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, what means in English, that fasting has been prescribed upon you as it was prescribed upon those before you, in order that you may gain taqwa, that you may gain God consciousness or the fear of Allah Azza wa Jal. Now we begin by saying Ramadan Mubarak for those of you who are fasting today. And may this month be a month like no other. A month which brings with it great transformation, great openings, and closeness to Allah Azza wa Jal. As Muslims, the Prophet ﷺ said in a famous hadith, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ, how wondrous are the affairs of a believer. For all of his circumstances are good for him. If he is struck by a calamity, he's patient, and that's good for him. And if he's struck with a blessing, he's grateful, and that's best for him. As Muslims, we always make lemons into lemonade. We always find ways of turning the difficulties into opportunities. Ways in which we can come closer to Allah in ways that we could never have done before. For the first time in my lifetime, and I'm sure for many of your lifetime, we'll be spending Ramadan at home. Unable to go to the masjid, unable to meet friends and family for iftar. It'll be a solitary affair, one in which we come closer to Allah Azza wa Jal individually, turning to Him in the darkness of the night and in the broadest of daylight. So we have to make sure that we make the most of this opportunity. Ramadan for me is the greatest miracle for Muslims. Perhaps one of the most wondrous things of all. Because it's the biggest evidence that I can give to you that you can change. If you ask anybody who is not a Muslim and has been asked about fasting, they will say it's impossible. How can you restrain from food and drink? How can you hold back from all the pleasures that Allah Azza wa Jal has afforded us and said it's okay? But you have to restrain yourself in these circumstances. Ramadan is the biggest testimony that Allah Azza wa Jal wants to show us that we have that ability. We can control our appetite during the day. We can control our desires during the day. We can control our tongues and our willpower. But it says something else that's perhaps even greater. Not just that you have the ability to transform, but that transformation through difficulty can actually make you happier. That when things are hard, when things are against what you would normally want to do, you actually feel happier. If I was to say to you that through difficulty, through suffering, through pain, you'll actually gain something. Because in the eyes of a purely secular, non-Muslim person who doesn't understand or has never experienced Ramadan, that's exactly what we're saying to them. But every single one of you, in sending your Ramadan Mubarak, in the joy that filled your heart when this month entered, you began to feel pleasure in something you know many other people will find difficult. And in that we find a metaphor of just how this month is a transformative month for us. And how in difficulties that we live in, we can find the eases. We can find the pleasures. We can turn those lemons into lemonade. Find opportunity amidst difficulty. And that's how the affairs of a Muslim should be. Ramadan's a time for us to welcome all of those blessings and opportunities that Allah gives us. A time where your sunnah salah is given the reward of a fard salah. And the fard is amplified even more in reward. A time in which the recitation of the Quran is encouraged. In which every moment that you live by in your day, you are worshipping Allah in some way. Whether it be in the fast during the day, whether it be the breaking of the fast in the evening, which is a worship, and it's a gift from Allah Azza wa Jal. Whether it be the taraweeh in the evening, or whether it be the sleep in which you recapture the energy to go through the day again. Every moment is a moment of ibadah. But this Ramadan is like no other, because for the first time, we're asked to stay indoors. We're asked to stay alone and to turn to Allah in these moments. But just like Ramadan as a whole allows us to turn these difficulties into opportunities, I want to give you some ideas of how you can make this Ramadan a Ramadan of opportunities, a Ramadan of transformation. Because as one thing gets taken from you, at least twice the amount gets given back. For Allah Azza wa Jalla says, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. With hardship comes ease, and indeed with hardship comes ease. He repeats, without going into the grammar, the emphasis of the opportunity to gain multiple blessings, at least two, for every one difficulty that you get. There's a book by James Cleary called Atomic Habits. And in this book he describes the process in which we can begin to implement change within our lives. As you read the book, and what we will go through today, is a step-by-step process of how you can make the most of this Ramadan. How you can use this opportunity and these difficulties to transform your life to become one of great worship in this month. In this book, named Atomic Habits, he argues that the greatest change begins with the smallest of steps. An atom being the smallest component you could measure within a compound, within a body, within an existence. And if you begin with this smallest step, you can actually begin to transform yourself. But before you can go into any of the steps, there has to be a willingness to change, an appetite for it. He calls it an identity, one that you can identify yourself as the thing you're aiming to be. The examples he gives is, if somebody wants to be slim, they identify themselves as a slim person, because a slim person doesn't eat these things. A slim person exercises daily. A slim person looks after their health. If a person wants to be a reader, then a reader carries with them a book. A reader goes on trips to the library. A reader speaks to other people and joins book clubs. The first step to change is identifying with what you want to change into. And as Muslims, what greater identity do we have than our faith itself? An identity that intrinsically speaks of our desire to come close to Allah, of submitting to Allah Azza wa Jal. And when a decision comes to you about what to do, your decision is a question of what Allah Azza wa Jal would like me to do. What is the opportunity here? Does this align with what our Prophet ﷺ used to do? And if he does it, then this is what I want to be. I want to be like the Prophet ﷺ. So this Ramadan, reaffirm your identity. Reaffirm your commitment as a Muslim to want to become that better person. Become that better person in the smallest of steps. Things which transform bit by bit in order for you to become like the best of creation, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He then goes on to identify a 4-step cycle. A cycle which he says is the individual steps for any habit to form. The first begins with a cue, then a craving, then a response, and then a reward. A cue is an alert to notify you of something's happening. A moment that identifies that action that you need to take. The craving is when you hear that action, consciously or subconsciously, you begin to think about it. Whether it's summer and ice cream, and you begin to salivate as you go to the park and you go, I need the Mr. Whippy 99. Or whether it's sitting on your couch in the evening and a cup of tea. It just doesn't feel the same without something brewing in your hand. Each of these things, a cue has happened. Summer has come in. Sitting on the sofa has happened. And you begin to crave something. And what he says is we can begin to reprogram this to work our own desires in a way that works with what we're seeking to achieve. So after the craving comes the response. How is it that you act? And what is it that you do? And of course, after you take that response, you receive the reward. You receive that dopamine kick. You receive that satisfaction of the cold ice cream in the summer, of the hot brew as you sit down on your couch. These steps can be broken down and used in order for us to be able to build good habits. What he does very usefully, and what I've taken from him, is use these steps and given a practical toolkit for each of us to use this Ramadan in order for us to build good habits and in order for us to make that transformation which we want to change. Ramadan is a month that allows us to turn to Allah Azza wa Jal. But its intention is not to begin and end a worship. Its intention is to begin and continue a worship. There's a dear uncle that I know within our local community. And he, when I first met him, admitted that he didn't used to pray. An elderly man. And he came to Ramadan and he said, for this Ramadan, I'm going to just begin my prayers 5 times a day and I won't miss a single prayer. And every prayer he continued, he carried on throughout the year, but he didn't do any more than that. A year later, he said, this year I'm going to add to it some sunnahs. He continued with that throughout the year. And then a year later, he started praying some in the masjid. Step by step, step by step. This year, if you were to meet this same person, you would not believe where he started. He's a completely different person. All because he took the incremental steps. This Ramadan that we spend at home is a time for us to transform our homes, to make it into the environment that's conducive to the people we want to be, to begin to adopt the habits that allow us to be the people that the Prophet ﷺ described as the people he wished and yearned to meet. His brothers, those who followed him without seeing him. The first step in order for us to do this is that you have to make it obvious. In order for you to instigate the cue, in order for you to instigate the action that you want, you have to make that action obvious in your life. Coca-Cola stated that 45% of their sales happens at the end of an aisle. When you go to a supermarket, you get this end of aisle space. They say 45% of their sales occurs from there. Because what happens is people walk past and it's obvious to them. They remember as they go to the counter to pick up a can of Coke. The Americans, after the Vietnam War, worried that there would be a significant heroin problem as people began to take drugs when they were conscripted into service over there. It was such a problem, they commissioned study after study to figure out what they can do with the troops as they return back to their country. But what they found is after they returned back home, only 2% of those had actually continued the drug habit that they picked up. The vast majority of people actually dropped their habit. And on further inspection, they noticed that the only tangible difference, or the main tangible difference that changed, was that when they were in the war, they were surrounded in a particular environment that instigated a cue that drove them to take this drug. And when they returned back to their families and their normal life, many of those cues became absent. And the same desires and craving never got initiated in order to spiral that circle of self-control. So this Ramadan, what do we do in our homes? A Ramadan, we're going to be inside our houses for most of the day. Start creating cues for you to remember the things you want to do. If you struggle to pray 5 times a day, make a space in your house that you know is a time for prayer. But even greater than that, the Prophet ﷺ established something called the adhan. Something many of us have forgotten. If you struggle to do it in your home, you can get these alarm clocks now that give the adhan. The adhan is a cue for you to hear and remember that salah has come in. Find a simple app or buy one of these clocks, ideally, because a clock is independent of you. It's in the house at all times. That can remind you that you need to pray. Use it as a cue to remember. If you want to increase in your remembrance of Allah, of dhikr, start putting portraits of things that can remind you to say Subhanallah, to say MashaAllah. And if you struggle with certain habits, if you scroll too much down the Instagram feed, or you spend a bit too much time talking about other people, start making those objectives more difficult. Place barriers between you and those things in order for you to begin to turn away. The first and most important thing is to make it obvious, because that's where the chain begins. And if we can begin to transform our homes, make our environment conducive to the people we want to be. On the extreme, you could hide the TV, but we don't need to go that far. But simply use things to allow you to shape your environment, placing a prayer mat in the right place, placing a masbaha, a tasbih in the right place, to remind you. My family, they place a pot of tasbihs on the coffee table in front of a TV. So that when you're watching TV, you just pick one up and you just start doing dhikr. As you're doing dhikr, you're watching TV, but you're doing this beneficial side habit that actually becomes beautiful. So after you make it obvious, the second is you need to make it attractive. If you can want to do something, you're going to want to continue this. If we can anticipate the reward, if we can see the immediate benefit, then we will want to do it again and again. There's an interesting hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he described about the pleasures he has of this world. And he mentions the third one, which I think baffles many people, if we're honest with ourselves, is that the Prophet ﷺ says, وَجُعِلَ قُرَّةُ عَيْنِي فِي الصَّلَاةِ. And the greatest pleasure, the pleasure of my eye, has been placed in prayer. Now, many people read this about how the Prophet ﷺ enjoys prayer and how wonderful it is. But I'm going to read that very literally. He actually enjoyed praying. Prayer was a pleasurable thing for him. How can we make prayer pleasurable? Now, it takes many, many years for us to be able to achieve prayer intrinsically to be pure for us. And we shouldn't expect ourselves to go from 0 to 100 in a single step. Begin by instigating rewards that you can associate with every time you pray. A man, one of the leading sales directors at a company, was asked what tip did he use in order for him to gain so many sales. He said every morning he would sit with an empty cup and 120 paper clips. And every time he made a call, he'd pick a paperclip up and place it in the empty cup. A simple, tedious action, but gave him a sense of achievement, a sense of fulfillment. He would continue throughout the day until all the paper clips are moved into a single cup. And that sense of achievement made him continue going on and on and on every day. He associated a pleasurable action as small as moving a paperclip into a cup as being a motivation for him to continue the action. I heard from Ustadha Ansar Tamara Gray. Now she gave a really good tip that I thought was beautiful. When you want to wake up your kids for Fajr, make them a glass of hot chocolate. When they wake up, they will associate in their mind drinking hot chocolate with waking up for Fajr. Yes, their intention is going to be mixed, etc. But the purpose is to create that craving in the mind of the child, in your own mind. What's the evidence for that? You, every single one of us, tomorrow or today, will wake up for Fajr. Because you know that suhoor was waiting for you. You know that you have a meal that you will eat and you get pleasure from it. Yes, we worry if you don't eat it, you're going to struggle. But let's just face it. We know that when we wake up, as difficult as it is to wake up, we will wake up because there's food waiting for us. Start associating pleasure with action. If you want to read more Quran, give yourself a reward. We've just, in the effort to help people during this lockdown, we've created the Quran Club Challenge. Now you can do this for free. You can try and read the Quran as every day and see if you can read the Quran every day throughout Ramadan. But what we've done is we've added this bit where you can put money in for yourself or your children to earn back for every day you read Quran. It's an amazingly successful tool. We've tried this for about 4 months with the kids that we had in our local area. About 80% of those, all of those kids read Quran 80% of the days over the last 4 months. 80% of the days. That means they read Quran for about 3.5 months over the last 4 months. If you, being an adult or a child, can associate positive rewards with an action, we're human beings, and you have to play and make the advantage to yourself. Give yourself a kind of a cheat code that will allow you to continue. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows that we're doing things for Him. When we asked the children for the Quran Club Challenge, why do you read Quran? They all said, we want the reward from Allah, and that's the greater reward. And this habit will continue with them, because if they build it at this age, or if you build it at this age, in a year or 2 or 3, you might not need that. But it's a beautiful way for you to be able to manifest that reward, and to be able to get the pleasure, so that you can make it attractive. So the first, make it obvious. Make it something that you see regularly. The second, make it attractive. After you perform an action, see the reward. Many of us go to, the other example I was going to mention, we all go to Taraweeh in the evening. When have we ever last prayed Qiyam? When have we ever stood at night and prayed extra prayers? But we all do it in Ramadan. Because when we go to the masjid, we have that social feeling. We have the comfort that we've experienced of hearing the Quran. We have that ambiance, as some people say. I heard one person just remind me, he said, it's like the brothers all standing there like this, and it's just amazing, the solidarity, and the sisters hugging each other, and etc. We have pleasures whether we know them or not, and it's not wrong to do so. The Prophet sought pleasure in salah. It's not to say he wasn't doing it for the sake of Allah, hasha. Of course, the Prophet lived for the sake of Allah. But it's to recognize that we have these pleasures and we can tone them and tune them to be able to build the habits we need. The third step is to make it easy. So after making it obvious and after making it attractive, make it easier for yourself. If you had a hose pipe that had a bend in it, in order to get more water, you can increase the pressure, which is what we tend to do in Ramadan. Or you can just unbend the hose. I know that because I had a plumber who looked at our own hose and it discovered that it was just a bend in the pipe. Alhamdulillah, they didn't charge anything for it. But it could have been a very expensive mistake. Make these simple changes easy for you. They noticed there's a book called Guns, Germs and Steel. And they noticed the first statement in the book, he goes, continents are different shapes. Which seems like a nonsensical, useless statement. But what he observed in that is that when countries spread, they tended to spread from east to west, like empires, from east to west and not from north to south. Because east to west will share mostly the same climate. And it's far easier to grow in the environment that you're familiar with than in an environment you're unfamiliar with. When we want to make a change, make it easy for ourselves. Don't pressure yourself. Apply what we call the 2-minute rule, a study which is shown to be something that is an effective way of building a habit. When we want to read Quran, many of us in Ramadan will pick it up and will read 20, 30 pages a day. But there's a saying that if you want to build a habit, make sure that habit takes no more than 2 minutes. Let yourself become accustomed to joining in. Make yourself used to just the feeling of doing that thing at that time. And if it's easy, you'll do it again and again and again. And with time, you can begin to ramp it up. We make it easy for ourselves, then we can make it successful for ourselves. There was an example that was given around this, around Salah. If we make it easy for ourselves to pray by always being in wudu, or if we make it easy for ourselves to read Quran by just having it on our phone and reading it wherever we are, or if we make it easy for ourselves to make dhikr by carrying a prayer bead with us all the time, then it's just straightforward. You don't have to worry, it's always carried with you. These sorts of tips are the tips we want to start doing in this Ramadan, a different Ramadan, a Ramadan which we spend indoors. And finally, make it satisfying. If you can do a habit that is enticing for you, something that is attractive for you, then you will continue to want to do it. The first 3 steps help you build a habit. This last step makes you keep a habit. They did a study in Pakistan where they looked at and wanted to improve the hygiene of people, noticing an increasing level of diarrhea. So they noticed the soap bars that people used were largely these square blocks, and I'm sure people who've been to these regions will know, this square block of slab that people wash their hands. That's not a particularly pleasurable experience. What they did is they started introducing soaps with a perfumed scent to them. And they started giving them out for free. When people wash their hands, they smell their hands, it's pleasurable. So they just got this habit of wanting to wash their hands, because the pleasure came from the smell. Wrigley's chewing gum. Chewing gum has been around for many years. But Wrigley succeeded when they added these spearmint, peppermint flavors, making chewing gum a pleasurable experience. They then went further and made it make your mouth clean, improve the health of your hygiene of your mouth, making it attractive, enjoyable for people to want to do. Now people chew gum as a leisure as opposed to anything else. And just like that, we see the same in Ramadan. We wake up in the mornings, every morning, to have suhoor because we have pleasure in it. We have iftar and we look forward to iftar, which gives us pleasure to keep going in our fast. Taraweeh builds that community and it allows us to continue the habit. If we can continue these things, making them fun and engaging, creating rewards, then of course Allah Azza wa Jal will give us tawfiq. And with the tawfiq of Allah, we can begin to build these habits. So here's some practical Ramadan toolkit. Something for you to take away at the end of this khutbah, for you to make this Ramadan a different Ramadan. Not just because we are unable to go to the masjids, but make it a Ramadan that's transformational. One that you can build new habits that you take with you for the rest of your life. Begin by purifying your intention. Create the identity of what it is you're doing and why. We are Muslim, and a Muslim seeks to become a better person all the time. So make sure that as a Muslim you will do what is recommended to you by Allah Azza wa Jalla and by the Prophet, because they only tell us what to do knowing that it will make us happier. Then begin by making it obvious. Start shaping your home in a way that will help you become more religious. Create a prayer space. And we've seen people create these mini masjids in their home. Create a space which you are familiar with, that this is the time for prayer. Buy or download an adhan app that gives the adhan daily to remind you when it is time to pray. Try and remain in wudu, to always be in a state that you can be pure and ready to pray. And put perhaps some decoration to remind you when you see these paintings of Allah Azza wa Jal and His Messenger. If you place next to the TV some nice calligraphy, it will remind you that Allah Azza wa Jal is watching. If you place some prayer beads on the coffee table, you'll remember to remember Allah as you watch TV. So step 1, make things obvious. Step 2, make it attractive. And for this, we've created 2 things for you. The first is we've made the quiz night every Tuesday for families to join in. The purpose of this is to make education fun. You're reading the Quran, you're engaging with the Quran, and you can join in at home with your own keypad. You use your phone as an interactive keypad to type in the answers. Everyone who's joined it has loved it. But what's most important is I've got them reading Quran, and they love reading Quran. They're asking me to do it next week. They want to do it more often. Make it attractive. Make the Quran fun for your kids. And there's a brother, Wasim Mir. Inshallah, he'll be working with the Quran Club, trying to get these sorts of things and top tips on our channel for parents to be able to do these things with their kids. And the second thing, which we're really excited to launch, is this Quran Club challenge. You can use it for free, but we've created this premium element to it, where you basically just deposit money for either yourself or for your children to earn, as a reward, as a target to aim for. So that every day you read, you get that little bit of money back, or something to look forward to. Creating that pleasure so that you can begin to build a habit. And inshallah, once it's established in a year or 2 or 3, and you're firm on that tradition, you can begin to remove that reward if you wish. But it's a really powerful and proven way to help build a habit. Thirdly, make it easy. Make it simple for you to go to. And create the environment, as we said, for you to be able to turn back to it. And finally, make it satisfying. Something that, after you've done it, you feel a sense of accomplishment. And this, first and foremost, is given by Allah Azza wa Jal. After you perform any form of ibadah, there's a pleasure that's placed in the heart that no other pleasure can be like. Allah Azza wa Jal says, what the Prophet says, when a person lowers his gaze from seeing something which is haram, Allah places a pleasure in his heart that only those who experience that, will go through that, will taste. A pleasure like no other. So let's remind ourselves that this Ramadan is like a metaphor. The difficulties we face in Ramadan don't overturn or don't overcome the amount of pleasure that we know we will feel. And just like Ramadan is an incredibly pleasurable, incredibly joyful experience, even though it may seem difficult, perhaps we can make these lemons that we live in today into lemonade, finding opportunity and pleasure in the difficulties that we surround us. May this Ramadan be accepted from all of us. May it be a means of great protection for us. Of course, unfortunately, this is not a khutbah. This is just a virtual khutbah. So you will need to stand up and pray your 4 rak'ahs of dhuhr in congregation with your family, inshallah. Stand up and pray as you would pray normally with dhuhr. The reason we're doing this talk is to represent some element of what a Jum'ah would be, in order to honor the time of Jum'ah, so that inshallah we can receive the reward and we can sanctify this. Because Allah says in the Quran that whoever glorifies, magnifies, raises anything which symbolizes the divine, then it's from the piety of hearts. And by us symbolizing this Jum'ah khutbah, creating something like it, inshallah, it's from the piety of our hearts. Inshallah, this is a productive Ramadan. Inshallah, this is a Ramadan that's accepted. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.